Generic greetings and welcome to Science Insanity, a channel dedicated to bringing my love of science fiction in all its high-stakes tension to you, the viewer. Today, we'll be covering what is, in my opinion, one of the coolest and arguably best depictions of a stealth ship in all of sci-fi, the Amun-ra stealth frigate from the Expanse, a beautiful, asymmetrical beast of a vessel designed with the most advanced technology available by Protogen Corporation, meant to transport the protomolecule across the solar system, as well as carry the crimes against life created by it, and hide all the shady business around it. You remember the protomolecule, don't you, Steve?
Bro, I'm still waiting to be introduced.
I hate you. That was supposed to be your intro, you idiot. It's a little... You know what? Whatever. It's fine. Whatever. Along for the ride is my co-host and friend, Science Illiterate, filling in for the comedic relief, Steve. Say hello, Steve.
Hello.
There. Okay, you got your stupid hello. You remember the protomolecule?
Yeah, I think I do, yeah.
Awesome. Great.
It's that thing that will, eat you alive.
Yes, indeed. Today, we're going to be talking about the Amun-ra, which is the ship that's actually responsible for carrying that unbelievable Satan particle around the solar system and getting all of the events of the Expanse to actually kick off. We will get into that a little bit later, but before we actually start the video, if you'd like to support Sci, then check out our Patreon linked below, or if space bucks are short, like, comment, sub, or share the channel around, since every little bit helps. Plus, your AI overlord demands algorithm fodder. Get to it, pawns, it's no longer a request. And with that, let's talk about what is, like I said, the coolest stealth ship design in all of science fiction because of how unique it is and how it handles some of the differences in space compared to stealth in atmosphere. And oh man, Steve, you have no idea how much I want to nerd out over this right now, but we'll leave the more technical stuff for later in the video. Before we get to all of that...
Refrain.
Okay, fair enough. Wait a minute. You're an engineer. What do you mean keep the technical stuff away? Isn't that like you know what? Whatever.
I'm failing to see the issue here.
Before we get into all of the technical stuff, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the ship and why it was built. The Amun-ra was built by Protogen Corporation. They were an extremely powerful corp based on Earth. They did research and development in extremely advanced materials and chemical sciences, as well as having several other subgroups. Basically, think of Protogen like having a hand in every pie everywhere. They did a little bit of everything, and because of their parent corporation, Mao Kwiatkowski and Jules Pierre Mao, the guy that's actually responsible for all of this garbage, they basically get access to pretty much anything and everything that they would need to keep their operations going and get their hands on supplies. So basically an entire shadow government style corporation here. This also meant that Protogen could draw on the expertise and facilities used to maintain and operate the massive fleets of transport ships and a lot of the professional personnel that worked in building these things. In order to make these incredibly advanced stealth ships, which are generations ahead of anything else anyone has, Protogen still needed outside resources from even which their parent companies couldn't provide. To get these, they played both sides of the Earth-Mars Cold War. So in order to actually make this work, Protogen basically promised everyone everything, and then immediately stabbed them in the back the moment they got what they needed. They required advanced stealth composites and weapons tech from Mars, and so they promised to deliver the Martians an incredibly advanced bioweapon, the hybrids. Only to then immediately turn it around and say, actually no, we're going to kill a whole bunch of your Marines in a weapons test, which you're going to keep quiet, and then we're going to quietly steal all of our research and go off to make our super weapons on some moon nobody's ever heard of. That the Earth traitors and conspirators in their government actually know of, so it's not even a secret weapons base. And then with Earth, they basically said, oh yeah, don't worry, we'll give you a whole bunch of advanced tech, a whole bunch of weapons, armors, all of this fancy stuff that'll make your fleet indestructible. You'll be the absolute power in the solar system again, we promise. And so they got access to all of their shipbuilding resources and advanced engines and all of the fancy black sites across the moon that build their secret shit, and then proceeded to immediately stab them in the back by spying on all of their stuff and selling out a whole bunch of resources to Mars to sweeten the pot, to then stab them in the back later, like we said. So it's just a wonderful example of pissing off literally everyone, biting every hand that could potentially feed you.
It's just a GG Reds moment.
I see no negative consequences arising of this in the future.
No, there couldn't be any. Certainly.
Joke's on you, idiots. In order to face the consequences of my actions, they have to catch me first, and I'm invisible in my new stealth ships. Goodbye! So each of the major factions contributed something towards the project, but again, it's more accurate to say it was stolen through backroom deals and corporate espionage.
What did the Belters contribute?
They contributed the bodies and the space stations for the protomolecule testing and war crime. They
that is pretty important.
They gave their lives for science. Thank you, Belters.
Integral part of the process. It was very greatly needed.
Oh, yeah, it's great. And the best part is they didn't even get anything back for it. It was purely altruistic.
Didn't they get the proto-molecule back? Not contained, of course, but...
You know what? Yeah, we can say that. They also got a massive dose of radiation and death, which, you know, considering the conditions a lot of Belters live in, step up. The first ship of the class and its namesake, the Amun-ra. It was named after the Egyptian god of the same name and was initially constructed at the Bush shipyards on Luna, the moon. One of those wonderful dark sites that is technically...
Luna the moon. Wonder what the inspiration for that one was.
I call it Luna. Its name is Luna, alright? That's the name of the moon. But the reason I have to specify it's the moon is because there are so many moons in the Expanse that come up that your average person who, like, vaguely skimmed the series wouldn't know what the hell I'm talking about. Because the Bush shipyards aren't really, like, a thing. They don't come up much. It's very easy to completely ignore their existence.
I was just more making fun of the moon's name. No originality. It's Newfoundland all over again.
Oh yeah, like New York is so much better. Alright, moving on from names, it's fine. It is what it is.
I never said New York was a good name, so...
You know what? Speaking of, I think it's fine. Name literally just means moon. So like, its name is a descriptor. There are plenty of deserts out there that the name is literally just desert. Gobi means desert, so every time someone says the Gobi Desert, they're saying the desert. It's fine. It works. Not an issue.
I always say it's the desert. Moving on swiftly.
Moving swiftly along, we shall pay no attention to the man on the other side of the screen. The Amun-ra was the first of 9 ships of the class, all of which were deployed across the solar system except for the original itself. The Amun-ra was a testbed and was swiftly cannibalized for parts and materials to assist with the construction of the other 8 ships once it had outlived its usefulness and finished all of its testing. The first 6 ships that we see gathered in response to the Canterbury, stumbling on the Scopuli, a trap laid by the Anubis, and subsequently setting our main characters flying off into the void along the Night, the little escape shuttle.
Why do we have something named Anubis as well? Is the Amun-ra?
They are all named after the Egyptian gods. Do you want the full list?
Oh my god, no. I don't
Are you
recognize
sure?
the Egyptian gods.
No?
Hashtag not my god.
No? Here, I'll list them out anyways. The Amun-ra, the Horus, the Amenet, the Apophis, the Nephthys, the Hathor, the Sobek, the Anubis, and the Osiris.
Okay, I'm calling it the Ramen-ha. What's the issue?
No, stop. No. that makes it so... The ramen-ha? Pronounced like the noodle?
Yes.
It's a giant flying advertisement for cup noodles.
Cup of noodles, sir.
Oh,
Get it right. If you're
God.
gonna slander them correctly.
Whatever. Who cares? It's not important. Like I was saying, though, after this initial trap, the first 6 stealth ships ended up chasing down and fighting the Doniger in an attempt to stop them from getting information about the trap and the protomolecule and all of this shit that could potentially have been a security breach. So, in order to do that, they figured, we're gonna murder a whole bunch of people and blow up the Doniger. However, despite the attack being reasonably successful, all 6 ships were lost in the attack after the Doniger decided victory is not exclusive with death. So, by detonating all of the explosives and the reactor and everything else on board the Doniger, the Donnie decided, middle fingers up, fuck you, I'm taking you all to hell with me, and vaporized all the remaining stealth ships that didn't die during the initial attack. So, the first 6, gone. Wiped off the face of the universe in nuclear fire. One of the vessels kicked off the entire fiasco of the Expanse by attacking the Canterbury and the aforementioned Scopuli. This was the Anubis, the ship that actually laid the trap that started all of this. The last of the operational stealth ships was on guard duty at Thoth Stations, one of Protogen's secret research bases. And it sounds like Hoth, but with an extra T at the end. Every time I say it, I feel like I'm about to start slurring my words, but no, that's actually the correct way to pronounce it. So while none of the stealth ships survived the early parts of the Expanse, their effect was the first ripple in so many different events, it's not even funny. It also helped spur the Belt into becoming an actual nation and becoming an actual part of the plot rather than being the totally oppressed minorities out in the middle of the ass end of nowhere in space. And they did this accidentally by committing so many crimes against humanity against them that they finally united in some loose coalition to fight back against the inner planets and all of the corporations abusing them. And this also led to Marco Inaros' climb to power, the super space terrorist that hit Earth with like 1 million meteors. It was like 3, I think, but for the most part, yeah, he launched a ton. Yeah, he was going to try to completely erase life on Earth again, pull a dinosaurs on him, so good thing he was stopped. But yeah, they directly caused his rise to power by giving his extremist voice some level of credence with the average people. And with that, let's talk about the actual specs of the ship. Now, the Amun-ra class is not the biggest of ships. It comes in at 24.2 meters at its absolute widest, and around 61 meters at its longest. The ship was fairly chunky compared to most of the other ships in the Expanse, which are more like rockets, a tower of metal and bad memes. The Amun-ra was far wider. It was... the easiest way to explain it, it's more ovoid. Let me get you some pictures of what this thing looks like from the front. So this is what the Amun-ra would look like almost from directly forward. It is extremely chunky as far as ships go, and that serves a very specific purpose, which we'll get into later. But one of the reasons I think this ship is so goddamn cool.
It do be a chunker.
It's a little fat, yeah. Despite being larger than all of the contemporary frigates and corvettes, the Amun-ra was surprisingly lightly armed, at least in the conventional sense by raw numbers. It carried only 4 point defense guns and 2 missile tubes. However, because of its design, as you can also see in that image, it could only reasonably fire 2 of its point defense guns at any given time or in any given direction, as most of them were pretty much blocked off by the ship's chunky-ass design. The 2 missile tubes that it carried are pretty on par for what you would think of a ship that size. You could probably get up to 3, maybe 4 for dedicated missile ships, and that alone wouldn't be anything to write home about. In fact, if you really look at it, it seems hilariously undergunned. However, the secret is that it cheats. It cheats like you wouldn't believe. Sci-fi techno-magic comes in again in order to make the Amun-ra not only superior to similar-sized vessels, but a notable threat to even far larger warships, and when operating in groups, they sucker punch the hell out of the most powerful ship in the entire Expanse universe. The Donager is a monster. The 4 PDCs were standard Bush shipyards make and model, so there's not much to touch on there, other than the fact that they had monstrously superior tracking and interception ability than any other competing point defense guns. While the defense grids of Earth and Martian warships rely both on precision and weight of fire to hem in and destroy incoming torpedoes, the tracking on the Amun-ra's PDCs was good enough that often a single cannon could intercept multiple warheads one after another. The 2 missile tubes it had were also highly advanced and basically got to cheat. Auto-reloading and firing systems actually made these things hilariously deadly. They could dump many times more torpedoes into the void than even larger warships with significantly more raw torpedo tubes. If I recall correctly, we see each one firing 3 or more torpedoes from each launcher, like, basically instantly. The easiest way to think about it is what they're portrayed as is almost like a semi-automatic missile launcher. It fires as fast as you can pull the trigger. So in a one-on-one, There's a really good chance that the Amun-ra could overwhelm destroyers or even some older cruiser-class vessels, since its guidance was also so advanced that it could give problems to the point defense grid on the Donnager. The torpedoes maneuvered and altered course way harder and way more effectively than most of the munitions of pretty much all the other factions in the Expanse. The real killer, though, was the Kopesh pattern light railgun mounted in the thing's bow, the glowing section there. So the reason that this was so deadly on the Amun-ra is that it was the smallest ship at the time to ever carry any form of railgun. It was both a surprise for any ship that it was fighting and also extremely deadly. Unlike most railguns, it could store up charge silently while its stealth systems were still operating, open up its gun bays, deploy the railgun, and immediately shit out like 3 railgun shots back to back to back without needing to actually slow down and reload. It's hilarious techno magic that this thing is capable of doing that. They simply snap their fingers and go, ooh, magic technology. Don't look behind the curtain, please.
I can do this now. Get fucked.
So having a rapid fire and super velocity hole puncher is a very scary combo on a ship of its side. The weirdest thing that the Amun-ra has is you look at that first image, you see all those triangular shapes on it?
Mm-hmm.
Those are breaching pods. It carries boarding pods that are meant to slap into an enemy ship, punch through the hull, and deliver a whole bunch of Marines. Do you understand why this is hilariously stupid?
I do believe so, yes.
That's wonderful.
Good.
I'm so glad that your learning on science fiction is coming along. Why is this a terrible idea?
Typically, holes in ships in space do not mix.
Okay, yeah, that is technically correct. There are a few other reasons. What might those be?
Oh, you're going to be boarding a ship full of crew that presumably have armaments. I don't know.
Anything else? Maybe why is it dangerous to run into a telephone pole at like 100 miles per hour in your car? Is this what's
typically the sudden stop can hurt a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So come on, you're right there, Steve. You're so close. Extrapolate.
That I don't extrapolate well. Sorry.
When you are in space combat, ships are moving extremely fast. It is absolutely ridiculous to assume that it would be even remotely possible to fire a boarding pod at something and have it work. Even if by some minor miracle you hit the enemy ship in a way that actually allows the boarding pod to latch on, you still just launched a pod filled with people directly into what amounts to a metal mountain. What do you think is going to happen to them? They're going to turn to jam on the inside of the boarding pod.
They're going to be like the chief. They're going to be fine.
The chief is a power armor wielding madman. These are just regular dudes in spacesuits. No,
they're built different.
They are not. They would die. The boarding pods.
Oh.
The boarding pods are hilarious. I think they are really cool, but realistically, they would never work. Boarding in sci-fi is the most unrealistic thing about it. Even trying would probably just send a bunch of crew members to their death for no reason.
You're saying they couldn't just sneak up a couple kilometers from another ship and just like surprise and stealth and board?
Well, you see, there's generally a problem with that, which is the stealth works really, really well at longer distances, but you have to be literally point blank, like close enough that you could reach out and punch someone on another ship in order to fire the boarding pods accurately. The boarding pods don't exactly have heavy maneuvering, they have little RCS thrusters, that's it. So if you miss by a tiny amount, when you're a few hundred kilometers away, you've missed by tens of kilometers by the time the boarding pod actually gets to its target. So you need to be very close and moving pretty slow to fire them. However, ignoring reality for a little while, we are talking about science fiction here, these boarding pods were capable of punching deep into enemy ships by quite literally rocketing into them and using explosive cutting charges mounted on the front. And with a mix of magnetic clamps and actual physical clamps to lock the pod onto the enemy's hull without being thrown off, these things, once they're on, are basically impossible to get rid of. If the stealth ship actually needs to embark or disembark crew without the use of these suicidal boarding pods, they also have a little shuttle that is mounted in a tiny little hangar bay inside. There's a picture of it there on Discord. That is the Kanzu class stealth shuttle. It is very small. It's only got room for, I think, a couple people on board at any given time. The reason that it has to be really small, by the way, is because it's not fully stealth. There's a lot of exposed greebly bits on it, and having it be any bigger than that would make it show up on radar and sensors, like, instantly. So it needs to be incredibly small to actually make use of the limited stealth that it has. Powering all of this and allowing the Amun-ra to accelerate at high Gs was the unique Bush Shipyard's hyper-cooled Epstein drive. It doesn't have a special designation or name like the Doniger's engines, since it was meant to stay secret. The Doniger has the Kaminari Epstein drives. Instead, it was kept under the codename Silversmith. Honestly, that's a pretty cool name for starship engines. I'm pretty cool with that. And while the stealth ship did have armor strong enough to stop debris, space dust, and rocks, it wasn't enough to protect the ship from anything even remotely close to dangerous, as during the Battle of Thoth Station, the Amun-ra was torn apart at close range due to its lack of heavy protection as seen on cruisers and battleships, and its lacking raw number of point defense cannons with which to fight back. The Rocinante, which is the hero ship, has 6 point defense guns, all of which are capable of firing directly forward at the same time. Instead of raw armor or straight up mass to stay alive, the Amun-ra class relied on its stealth systems. Now, based on how the ship looks, how do you think it works?
The stealth capabilities.
Yep.
And say it does that thing about deflecting everything elsewhere, so it doesn't. Is this like normal radar or?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So this is one of those things I wanted to explain early on. You see, there are unique problems to actually being stealthy in space. Now, we'll talk about radar first. So in atmosphere, obviously everyone knows how radar works. A signal is sent out, it hits something, bounces back, and when it comes back to the receiver, you can tell how far away something is and roughly how big it is. Really, really powerful radars can also make out reasonable detail on whatever it is that they're actually looking at, or see through things like trees or whatever. For the most part, stealth planes only need to be made, or stealth ships only need to be designed to counteract radar, because things like infrared or visual is not really a problem. Visually, a lot of the modern planes and ships are fighting from over the horizon, so you can't see them anyways, because, light goes in straight lines, sucks to suck, say the laws of physics. And when it comes to stuff like infrared heat, that's also not really a huge issue. Infrared is very difficult to see at long distances because the atmosphere acts like a cushion. It will absorb a lot of that energy, so at extreme ranges, even the incredibly hot output from jet engines and stuff are relatively difficult to lock onto. So when it comes to stealth, the Amun-ra has a few problems it needs to get over. First amongst them is, active search, and the second is passive search. Now, active search is really obvious. It's the radar and laser systems that ships have to find things that are out there in space. Now, to deal with radar, the Amun-ra has relatively simple, but frankly, hilariously effective systems. Number one, the crazy asymmetrical design. This thing has no symmetry across any of its axes. Now, when you look at modern stealth jets, they are very sleek and very symmetrical, but that's not what actually gives them their stealth. That's necessary as part of the design because they need to be aerodynamic and actually, fly. When you're in space, aerodynamics means nothing. It doesn't matter. So you can design it to look any way you want. And to that degree, the Amun-ra's design is extremely chaotic. When it gets hit from almost any angle, it reflects the vast majority of any radar signal out into the void, away from the original source. However, it's still going to send something back. It's virtually impossible to make something 100% stealthy and have any incoming signal bounce off at perfect geometric angles. The incredibly chaotic design that the stealth ship has also contributes to hiding in plain sight. The returns it does give off end up making it look like a metallic asteroid. There's a scene in The Expanse where the Anubis, one of the stealth ships and the one responsible for blowing up the Canterbury and kicking off this entire disaster, is anchored up next to an asteroid and is pretty much entirely invisible. It's virtually indistinguishable from the rock around it, and the only reason the main characters even know it's there is because they were aware of it before they actually went searching. But when it comes to passive search, that's when you get to a little bit of a problem. Now, this is all of the stuff that you're not directly looking for, but that tends to stand out if you come across it or if you're really paying attention. This includes stuff like observing the heat signature given off by the ship just passively, because all of those electronic systems and the life support inside to stop the crew from, well, freezing to death are going to give off a lot of energy. But it's also some real esoteric shit, like watching the stars in the background to see if they suddenly disappear then reappear, and if they do, you know that there's something blocking line of sight. When it comes to the physical presence of the Amun-ra, well, again, you're hiding in plain sight. It is a relatively small, pitch black ship that blends into the void of space, and unless you know exactly where it is, it's extremely unlikely you're going to be able to randomly pick it out by just pointing your camera in a direction. In fact, I would wager it's virtually impossible, especially if it's thousands of kilometers away and basically a pinprick on any screen you might be looking at. As for dealing with thermal energy, well, if the engine's going, you're basically shit out of luck. That thing glows like the sun, so oops, guess you're just gonna have to cruise around on minimum power there, impulse and thrusters, so to say. But when the Amun-ra is just floating around trying to be unseen, the armor paneling, or not the armor paneling, but the surface of the ship, has a number of really interesting systems to contain and manage the heat. The first thing it has is heat sinks. The Amun-ra has a ton of its mass filled with internal capacity to store heat. Now, heat sinks aren't perfect. Eventually, they will build up to their maximum heat capacity and then start leaching that out into the surrounding components and material. If you've maxed out your heat sinks, you're basically at the point where the reactor is about to set the atmosphere of the ship on fire, so you probably have a few more issues than just things getting a little toasty inside the ship. But, for the most part, huge heat sink capacity means the ship can basically hide all of its energy emissions for quite a while without needing to radiate any of that out into space. But overall, the Amun-ra's stealth relies on giving enough back that it looks like something it's not. It's basically putting on a disguise and being so inconspicuous that nobody would ever think to pick it out of a crowd. And that pretty much concludes everything about the Amun-ra. Would you like to ask any questions at the end or say anything else?
Not about that, no.
Well, what would you want to? What would you ask about then, huh?
We have a Discord.
No, are we announcing it now?
Problem?
Yeah, it's not done.
Oh, I think it is.
We still have so much stuff we need to put in, like the rules.
Do we?
The rules page is empty.
Okay, I can change that.
If you type one thing in there and say done, I swear to God. Oh, come on. Okay, well, since Steve is apparently super ready to get this disastrous Discord server up, I will announce that we do, in fact, have a Discord server, a SCI branded whatever. But it's not ready, Steve. We have other stuff we need to work on after this video. It's not ready, Steve.
Oh, it will be ready by the time the video goes up.
It's gonna be up in like 2 days, and I would still like to give a little more time.
By then.
Oh my God. Okay, moving on to the patron thanks. To all the people supporting to all the people supporting Science Insanity, thank you very much. Your financial support is greatly appreciated, and I hope it'll continue in the future. For all of the patrons at the $5 tier, feeding Steve, even more so. Special thanks to David G, the original, Augie, 11 Bravo Crunchy, Terry Higgins, Pedro Munaz, David G, the other one, Silencer, Vox Apollyon, Phoenix, BT Legend, Electro Boy 11, Logan Maynard, Mickey, David Aramond, Creedome, Robin Stoppet, and the new patrons, Fenrir Striker and Tachi Tuscany. Tachi, your last name is way too hard to pronounce. Sorry.
Most common side moment.
Language is hard, and my brain is running on low power mode. I need to go recharge. We are
Thank
actually.
All that came out to the live stream on Saturday.
It was like 25 people that actually ended up showing up. There is going to be a VOD of that live stream coming up. We played through Halo 3 on Legendary. Link to my Twitch down below if you want to go check it out at the source. I'm going to edit the VOD a little bit for some of the more highlight moments and stuff. And yeah, that was an oof. Maybe we should have streamed on YouTube instead. People might have actually shown up. Ouch.